Mr. Vice President, thank you very much for taking the
Great
opportunity.
to be with you, man.
The book, Joe Biden, Promise Me, Dad. There is a lot in here. I want to talk about how it applies to what we're seeing today and the messages that people will take away. The first is the obvious, Mr. Vice President. What do you make of this state of political play between left and right with this Nunes memo and now the Democrat counter memo, the attacks on the Department of Justice? What do you make of it?
Well, look, it seems to me that I've been around for a long time. I got here during Nixon's impeachment, and it was Republicans who stood up and insisted that the Constitution be honored, insisted that the president behave consistent with the law. And it seems now that it's all about, everything with Trump is about him, and everything about him is what the Republican Party seems to be focused on trying to protect. And so much is not happening. Look, we are so incredibly well positioned to own the 21st century. And we're engaged in this race to the bottom in terms of how we treat one another, how we talk about one another, how, a guy I have great respect for is one of the leading conservative columnists, David Brooks, and he talks about this invisible moral fabric. And it's being ripped apart. And it has real consequences for us. And so
they say you're right. Trump and the Republicans, the Nunes cabal, however you want to define them, they say you're right. But what's tearing us apart is the Russia investigation. And they needed to do this to expose how wrong the Russia probe is. Now, I don't know that they achieved it. That's for you to judge. But they say that that's the problem. Do you agree?
No, I don't agree at all. Look, one of the things that I've been around so long, I helped write the act that everybody talks about. No one knows what FISA means. It just means the ability to go into a court, tell a judge about something that is highly classified, knowing it doesn't have to come out in court, and let him make a judgment in camera with just the parties to decide whether or not that information could or couldn't be used, a wiretap could be had or not had, et cetera. And to turn this into somehow the ability to run the risk of disclosing sources and methods, run the risk of disclosing what has been held so tightly. And look, the reason for this, excuse me for going on, but the reason why this notion of FISA came along was the Church Committee investigating the excesses of the intelligence community. And we said we have to have some oversight in the intelligence community. I remember going to a guy named McClellan in Arkansas who was the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. I said, do you know what the CIA is doing, Mr. Chairman? I was a 30-year-old kid. He said, yes. And I said, well, can you tell me what they did? He said, I can't. He said, I'm afraid. I'm so afraid I may talk in my sleep. Can't tell anybody. Well, this whole thing was about getting the intelligence community to be held accountable and have the confidence to be able to tell a very select group of women and men in the House and the Senate all that was going on. And they, in turn, could use that information, if they needed to, in a court of law. And that's all in jeopardy now. I mean,
well, they say the Democrats jeopardized it. I mean, not to, devil's advocate, but they say they needed to do this. Have you seen anything that gives you a reasonable concern that the FISA process was abused for political purposes?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen anything that would suggest that. The whole idea about this Steele dossier, whether or not it was identified as a Steele dossier, I'm told it was identified as partisan, number one. And number two, even if there had to be more that was offered. Because look, every 90 days you got to go into court and renew this. In order to renew the ability to continue to wiretap this individual, you have to have evidence to show that the initial request is bearing some fruit. It got renewed 3 times by 4 different people in the FBI and in the and the Justice Department and the Republicans as well. So I mean, it just seems to be such a seems irresponsible to me.
You worried about damage to the administration of justice?
Well, I do worry about damage. I worry about the full-throated attack. This is the first president. I've been here for 8 presidents. This is the first president to make a full-throated, unvarnished attack on the entirety of the FBI. Not going after J. Edgar Hoover, who was one person in the FBI and exonerated. This is to discredit the FBI and discredit his own Justice Department. You know, look, I spent a lot of time traveling around the world. What do you think they're thinking in Moscow? This is doing everything that Putin ever wanted. Sowing doubt about whether or not our justice system is fair, sowing doubt about whether or not there is anything that's remotely consistent with our Constitution. It's a disaster.
You think he should sit down with the special counsel?
If I were the president's lawyer, I would probably tell him not to sit down with the special counsel.
Why?
Because
and they subpoena you, and you wind up in front of a grand jury without a lawyer.
Yeah, and if you're in a situation where the president has some difficulty with precision.
That is one of the most subtle things I've ever heard you say.
And one of the things that I would worry about if I were his lawyer is him saying something that was just simply not true without him even planning to be disingenuous.
Do you think he has that little control over whether he tells the truth or not?
I just marvel at some of the things he says and does. Like, what, 2 days ago? Anybody didn't stand up and clap for him was un-American and then maybe even treasonous?
They say it was tongue-in-cheek. Democrats can't take a joke.
Well, let me tell you, he's a joke.
You say the president is the joke.
Yeah, I mean, in this kind of stuff. I mean, look, you know, what I think he understands. I think the people around him understand. What presidents say matter. Our children are listening. The world is listening. It matters what they say. And it's just amazing the outrageously inaccurate things the president says.
When it comes to this probe, do you regret that your administration, with President Obama, of course, didn't blow the whistle on these Russian efforts during the election? I get the calculation. But the idea that, well, Senator McConnell wouldn't come out and make it, who cares what he wanted at the time? Do you regret not saying more about this?
Well, I think if we had said more about it, we would have further undermined the legitimacy of the process. We didn't have the information we had 15, 20 days after the election was all over. We didn't have hard data we knew that what was happening in terms of intercepting emails and the like, but we didn't have the whole picture. And we knew that we believed that one of the purposes of what Russia was doing was to discredit the process, the whole process. And so if we came out and looked like we were Bigfooting the election a couple weeks before the election, implying that this is all about the Russians trying to help defeat Hillary Clinton, that it would have just thrown it into chaos. But if we knew what we knew in January, it would have been a different story.
You would have done it differently if you'd known more.
Well, I think we would have, because there would have been much harder data, and I think it would have been impossible, and I'm a friend of Mitch McConnell's, it would have been impossible for Mitch not to, in bipartisan way, join us in exposing what's happening.
Are we heading down a very bad road, or do you think this all ends well?
Look, when the president first got elected, I got heavily criticized for saying, I hope he succeeds because America succeeds and the president succeeds. And I found myself first bemused, thinking that maybe these were just over-the-top gaffes that were going on. But now I've gone from that to I'm genuinely concerned. There's two things that have popped up, Chris. One is that this naked nationalism, that it's now us against them. As Richard Haas says, there's three ways countries lose their ability to influence the world and lose their power. And one of them, which is advocating that power. We're advocating our responsibility around the world and putting everything in terms of us versus them. The second thing that combines with that is this phony populism. This notion that the way in which the only reason you have a problem is because of the other. It's because of that immigrant or that minority or because of someone else doing something to you. And so this president spent his entire time since he's gotten in office trying to divide the country instead of unite the country. And as I said, I am more optimistic about the chances for America in the 21st century than I have been in my whole career. We have the most advanced universities in the world where all the research comes out of. We have the most productive people in the world. We have the most agile venture capitalists. We're in a situation where we're energy independent in North America. I mean, what are we doing? We're not talking about any of the things that really matter. And all he seems to be trying to do is undo everything President Obama has done. But he's not able to do that, by the way.
Why not?
Well, because if you see what happens, he's tried to he's damaged health care, but it's not gone. He has gone after the Paris Accord, but you see mayors and governors and local leaders getting together and making sure that it doesn't have the effect that he intended it to be. You find us in a situation where, you know, there are millions of people still have, as I said, health care and preventive care. You find ourselves in a position where the education system is actually getting better and better, even though now there's a full-blown attack by the Secretary of Education on the things we put in place. He can't undo it all. He's hurting it. He's slowing the process. But most of all, we're missing an enormous opportunity to change the life for middle-class people.
DACA obviously matters, the executive order that came through under your administration with President Obama. Do you think the Democrats should do a deal, save the dreamers, give them the pathway that the president offered, we'll give you the wall? Would you do that deal?
It depends on what they meant by the wall, but one of the things that...
He's going to want to say wall at the end of it.
I don't care what Telly says. That'd be fine by me, but here's the point. The idea we're using almost 2 million young lives. These kids are Americans. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine 2 years old? Mom, don't take me across the Rio Grande. I don't want to go. It's illegal. Leave me here.
Rule of law, Vice President. That's what they say.
It's just, rule of law is a rule of equity. And there's such things as equity. And there's no equity in sending 2 million kids who've been here, 1.9 million, for the bulk of their life, who didn't come voluntarily and have abided by the law and the rules and are making great contributions to America.
Or they can stay, but not their parents, and they can only be guest workers. They'll never be like you and me.
That's a gigantic mistake. It's a gigantic, look, we're the only country in the world, of the industrial world, that is able to have replacement workers, able to continue to grow. The rest of the world, I mean, we are so incredibly short-sighted. But here's the point. The American people have a heart. The American people overwhelmingly think the lives of these kids shouldn't be bargained for anything. You just do it. Either do it or don't do it. But don't bargain their lives for a wall or for funding for a program. That is not the American way.
So then do the Democrats stand strong on that kind of principle and not do this deal? And then you have to see if the president's willing to pull the trigger on his own self-imposed deadline? Well, I mean, should the Democrats play it that way, the way you're saying it?
Well, I think the Democrats have to continue to make clear that this should not be a bargaining chip. This is inappropriate for use these kids' lives as a way to get more money for A, B, C, or D, or any particular thing.
But if they sign on to the deal, Vice President.
But no, I know, and it's always, having served there for 36 years, I'm always reluctant to go inside and negotiate. As you know, every time we had a trouble up in the Congress, I was the guy that got sent up to do the
That's why I'm asking you.
Well, I know a way I would have tried to negotiate it, but I'm not there. I'm outside. I'm not inside. I don't know where the elasticity is to make this. On the basic proposition that if you had a wall that provided us security that wasn't just an absolute waste of money, meaning national technical means to protect it, and all these kids had a path to citizenship, I'd be inclined to do that.
You'd give Trump the political victory in order to get the Dreamer deal done.
I don't care about his political victory. That's not how I view politics, whether or not it's a personal victory or not.
When you go to speak to the Democrats now, this is going to be a big deal. They have to figure out some very fundamental things. Being anti-Trump probably won't be enough. What is the challenge for your party?
The challenge is for us to step up and offer concrete answers, which we're doing. For example, when we talk about the plight of the working class. One of the plights is the cost of education, the cost of daycare, the cost of being able to care for your kid. And there's no reason in the world why we can't step up and have continuing education that's free, that we can't be in a situation where, look, today, one of the reasons why we ended up the most powerful nation in the world because of our education system. At the turn of the 20th century, in New York and other places, they said there's going to be 12 years of non-means tested free education. If we were doing that today, Chris, do you think we'd do it for 12 years?
No.
12 years is not enough. It's not even close. Everybody knows it. So
People
what the
don't
hell
want
are
to
we
spend
doing?
the money on other people's kids, though.
Well, no. Well, I don't think that. I think they think we don't have the money to spend. If you eliminated one single loophole called stepped-up basis, there's $1.34 trillion of loopholes out there for the wealthy and for others. If you just eliminated one that cost $17 billion, I could put every single qualified kid in America who qualifies into community college for free. Cutting the cost of four-year college in half. It costs $6 billion a year, and I can reduce the deficit by $11 billion because we're giving away $17 billion a year in a thing called step.
So an idea like that is a centrist idea. You've said before the Democrats have to think about how to get to the center and speak to the people that voted for President Trump. Your party is not moving to the center, Mr. Vice President. It's moving to the left.
Well, Chris, you know me well, and I don't want to correct you. My point is, I don't think you have to choose between your heart and your soul. If you go back and look at my record of 36 years in the Senate, I was rated as one of the most liberal senators in the United States Senate that 36-year period. I am the guy that spoke out on same-sex marriage and a whole range of other things. I take a backseat to no one and being progressive. I've found no distinction between being able to be progressive and worrying about working-class people. Middle-class people. They are not inconsistent. And to make the point, in the last campaign, I went to a factory up in Ohio, a Ford factory, and I started off and I said, let me tell you something. We have to elect children. And I went on and I said, here's the deal. Every woman's entitled to make the same pay a man makes for the same job. All these blue-collar guys went nuts. You know why? If their wife got paid the same for selling shoes, the man says selling shoes in the same place, they get to put 4 new tires on their car. They get to get a new faucet. They get to make sure they're able to pay their insurance. I said, look, it doesn't matter. It's none of your business who somebody marries. None of your business. They cheered. 3,000 guys cheered. Just don't tell them they have to live that lifestyle. It's anybody's, and any man who raises his hand to a woman is a coward. They went nuts because they got daughters and wives. We forget that these are the people I came from. Not just me, almost everybody. I mean, middle-class folks who are decent, honorable, and the thing that we have to do is we have to start looking at them and acknowledging and treating them with dignity. It's the job they do that we have to begin to honor. Anyway, it just drives me nuts.
This book has a very simple message when it comes to politics. It says Joe Biden needs to run for president.
No.
That's what this book says. Everything in here about relevance, what Bo called duty, what your sense of significance, whether you're quoting a philosopher or not, that was about fulfilling your responsibility writ large. I'm not saying you'd win. I'm not saying I wouldn't hammer you on a daily basis if you ran. But in this book, how hard for you is it to reconcile yourself with that sense of duty that he brought to your life and that you brought to his?
Well, look, everything with Bo was about duty, and everything about Bo was about the lesson he learned from my father. Everyone's entitled to be treated with dignity. I mean, everybody. For God's sake, everybody. And that's what Bo did. And what I try to point out here is you can have severe loss, but if you hang on to purpose. And so I'm trying like hell to do everything I think, it sounds corny, but that Bo would want me to do. I mean, when his mother and his sister were killed, he and Hunter were the kid. I looked up to them rather than look up to me. And the point in here is that the American people are better than their leadership is now. Across the board. And we just got to give them a chance. Whenever we give them a chance, they've never let the country down. And so from my perspective, I'm spending all my time, and I give you my word as a Biden, I'm spending all my time seeing we elect a Democratic House and have a chance to elect the Senate to stop this insanity and begin to right this ship again. And that's what I'm focused on. And I really mean that. And we got a lot of talented people in the Democratic Party, and I'm looking for some of these guys to come along.
Who's better than you?
Your father was better than me.
listen, don't make me get upset. You know how Pop felt about you. You know you guys represent the same things. And again, I'm not saying that the country would embrace it. I'm not saying you'd win. But it just seems like, I don't know how, when I read this book, and this was not easy for me, and it won't be easy for a lot of people and for the right reasons, and I hope they read it. It's been out, it has been read, but people should refocus on it. How do you not run for president? How do you not? When it is in your heart, it's in your head, you don't think anybody out there is better than you, and you've never had a moment in history that called for leadership more. How do you not run?
Barack, the president, asked me all during the end of the last administration, you know, how do you make the judgment? If I can look in the mirror in 2 years and walk away knowing I'm not walking away because I'm afraid or I don't have the nerve to try to do the job or I don't want to make the effort, then I'll be happily walk away for real. And there's a lot of new folks that potentially are coming up here. You know, we didn't know who Bill Clinton was 3 years out. We didn't know who Barack Obama was other than a tremendous speech he made. And they stepped up. They stepped up. And so, but I know one thing. We have to reclaim the essence of who we are as a country. We have to just get rid of this dangerous and, in terms of our security, dangerous notion of nationalism, and we got to get rid of this phony populism that just is just creating space for people to grab power.
It's not easy to do. One of the things you'll point out for people in this book is you captured a phrase that I heard your son say many times, but it didn't just capture how he was. You captured who he was. All good. I must have heard him say that 100 times. And when it was dealing with the depths of his fight against cancer or how he felt about anybody asking about anything. All good. You make a point to put it in.
My dad had an expression from the time I was a kid, and Bo lived it. He'd say, Joey, never complained and never explained. I can honestly say, without fear of contradiction, I've never met a single person in my life who ever heard Bo Biden complain about a single thing. Because it was just, my dad's other expression was, get up. Just get up. I told you I got a cartoon that sits in my desk that was bought at a Hallmark card store. And it's Hagar the Horrible. His ship is up, and it's one of these glass things, you know, with 2 frames in it. And Hagar is the Viking, and his ship is wrecked, and he's on the rocks, and he's looking up at heaven going, why me, God? And the next frame, a voice from heaven comes down, why not? My dad, when I was feeling down about myself 28 years ago, brought it over. I've never taken it off my desk. That was Bo. You just got to keep fighting. You got to keep fighting and believing.
Let me ask you something else. Again, I'm not objective on this stuff when your son's life comes into play. And I'm not objective about you when it comes to how you treat people who are in grief. You mentioned my brother in this book. We were blown away by how you looked to our family when Pop was coming near the end and when he was gone. And when I read this book, it reminded me of something. The message that you give that is of so much consolation to people about what you need to do to deal with the grief and what you need to remind yourself of and what you need to look forward to the someday when the passing of that person's memory brings a smile to your lip before it brings a tear to your eye. I wonder, though, the life that you've led and all the consolation you can give to others in those times, does it work for you? Is it easier to give the advice than it is to take it?
They're one and the same. In other words, I'm not able to give advice that I don't believe actually makes a difference. It made a difference in my life. And you know, when you are the recipient of so much empathy, so much support over the years, it's easy, and you know what it means to give that kind of empathy and support. You know that a simple word to someone in real trouble and a significant loss can make a difference, not in just the day, but can make a difference in the life. And, you know, it's all about finding purpose. You know, it's about, you know, I'm a big collector of quotes that have always meant something to me. Immanuel Kant talks about there's 3 parts of happiness. Something to do, someone to love, and something to look forward to. And what I learned out of my 2 experiences or 3 experiences is that if you have something to look forward to, you have a reason, a purpose, you have a reason to get up in the morning. And that's the way to keep the person and the persons you lost part of you, inside you. It sounds corny, but I really hope. When Bo said, "Promise me, Dad," it wasn't off of Maureen Dowd's column. She's a great reporter where she talked to him, knew that he wanted me to run for president. That's not what he meant. We were sitting at a dining room table a couple months before he died. And he said, "Dad, can you stick around?" And I said, "Yeah." And he looked at me and said, "Dad, I know no one in the whole world loves me more than you do." But he said, "Dad, I'm going to be okay no matter what happens. Promise me, Dad. Promise me, Dad, you're going to be okay." And what he meant was that I wouldn't walk away from my obligations. I wouldn't walk away. He knew I'd always take care of the family and they'd take care of me. But he wanted to make sure I stayed in the public arena. That's all I've done my whole life. That's all he did, that Hunter does, my daughter, my wife. And it is in that purpose. And I find myself doing what you probably do as a son. I do with my father. What would my dad think? I go around thinking, what would Bo think? I swear to God, what would Bo think? But Bo was, he was an incredibly decent, honorable man. And it was always about somebody else. Unless you figure out something that's more important to you than yourself, I think it's hard to be really happy.